Shalom Aleichem and welcome everyone as we are preparing for Shabbat. Parshat Vayeishev. Parshat Vayeishev, always a very tough parsha to deal with, as Yosef and his brothers, they get into an argument, and the brothers end up selling Yosef. They put him into a pit, and then they say, why should we kill him? Let's take him out. What will we gain from putting him in the pit and him dying? Let us sell him. And this was Yehuda's idea, and the pasuk tells us in chapter 38, verse 1, "V'hi ba'etahi vayered Yehuda me'et Ehav," that Yehuda went down from his brothers. And Rashi explains that the brothers told him, the brothers took him down from his status. He was even though he wasn't the oldest brother, he was what everyone listened to. They said, "Ata amarta l'mchara," you told us to sell him. That's why we sold him. And now we see our father is so upset. Ila amarta lahashivo hayinu shom'im lecha. If you would have told us to return him, we also would have listened to you. So the brothers are now telling Yehuda, it's really all your fault. And that's why the pasuk says that Yehuda went down. He went down from his status amongst his brothers. Now, what was Yehuda thinking? Why is he at fault over here? The question really is, the brothers are really upset with Yosef. The way the Mefarshim explains that they made a bed din, they said that he was trying to kill them, he was trying to get rid of them, it only should be him. And so they said he's chayav mitah, he's requiring to be killed. So Yehuda felt that, why kill him? Let's sell him, let's not kill him. If Yehuda would have said, let's return him to our father, would the brothers really would have listened? They probably wouldn't have, right? In fact, that's what some Mefarshim want to say, Tefasta meruba lo tefasta. This is based on the Gemara that says, if you try to grab a lot, you don't end up grabbing anything, right? Someone has like a major plan to do a million things, right? And then at the end of the day, none of it happens, because if you're trying to grab too much, you don't get anything. Yehuda felt the same idea. He said, I want to save Yosef, right? I want to save his life. But if I tell my brothers to go and return him, they're never going to listen to me. Not for they're going to kill him right here. So he felt the only way I can save him is by selling him. This way, at least I save his life. That's the way the Mefarshim want to explain how Yehuda thought through his logic. However, the Havetz Chaim and others say that Yehuda made a serious error in underestimating his influence. Yehuda really did have the influence on his brothers to save Yosef and return him to his father. That much influence, but he felt that he didn't have that influence. But really he did have that influence, and that was his mistake. The Havetz Chaim shared a true story that really happened. In a small town in Tsarist Russia, there was a Jew whose business was to make counterfeit money. That was his business. And over the years, he became a very rich man. You're printing your own money. And eventually, the Tsar's secret police caught up with him. He was arrested, and he was sentenced to a lengthy prison term in Siberia. As he was being taken away by the secret police, bound in iron shackles, he said, I want to make one stop before you take me away. I want to go to the Rav of this town. And they took him to the Rav's door, and the Rav came out of the house, and this Jew who's arrested, going off to Siberia, says to the rabbi of the town, Rebbe, everything that's happening to me, you are to blame. It is all your fault that I'm going to jail now. You knew what I was doing. You knew for years that I was printing counterfeit money, and you never told me to stop. As such, it's all your fault that now I'm being sent to Siberia. The Havetz Chaim, when he shared the story, he said, this is the responsibility that Rabbonim have. Of course they have to give tochacha, of course they have to give rebuke and musar in the proper way that'll be listened. But if rabbis turn a blind eye and they pretend they don't see and never talk about it at all, they are to blame. Just like Yehuda is being blamed here by the brothers because he really did have that influence. Sometimes Rabbanim, they think they don't have their influence as well. They think like Yehuda, they're not going to listen to me. But the truth is, we do have that influence. And Chafetz Chaim, not only did he preach this, but he also practiced this. The Chafetz Chaim lived in Radin, and there was a town nearby Radin that was lacking money to fix the mikvah. They didn't have a kosher mikvah in that town. And they were making appeals, and they weren't able to collect the funds. And the Chafetz Chaim, very advanced in age, in his last couple of years of his life, he made the trip to the village and called a town meeting in the shul. And this is what he said. He said, my friends, you know I'm already an old man, and I don't know how much longer I'm going to live. I'm going to come to heaven, and they're going to tell me, Yisrael Meir, you knew that there was a town next to Radin that was not having a proper mikvah. What did you do about it? I'll say I spoke to the people, I asked them to fix it, I asked them to donate money, but they refused. He said, my friends, all I'm asking you today here is to sign this paper that I came with. The paper says that I refuse to pay money for the mikvah, and it's not the Chafetz Chaim's fault. If everyone can please sign this paper, I'll leave you guys alone. Obviously, nobody wanted to sign that paper, and the musar worked, and people donated and fixed the mikvah. The Chafetz Chaim is teaching us a very important lesson, based on this Rashi over here, that if Yehuda would have told his brothers to save Yosef, they would have listened. Chafetz Chaim is teaching us that we fail to understand our power of influence on people. We have always this feeling they're not going to listen. It's not going to help. It's not going to do anything. But the truth is, obviously there's ways to do things, and you have to learn what's the best approach and how to come over and talk to someone and how to bring them closer. But everybody has an ability to influence.
Is this being recorded?
Yes.
Can I ask questions?
Sure. I mean, I don't know, I might not have the answer, but you can go ahead and ask.
What's the raya? It's the Chiddush is a Yehuda they would have listened to, meaning the other 9
Right.
brothers they would not have listened to. So and we could all be Yehuda. Who said?
No, not that we all be Yehuda. So the truth is, if you take a look,
you know your place.
Everybody's an influencer to someone else. For example, some places someone is a leader and the other people are listeners or followers, and then he goes into another sphere of for example, you go to work. Some people at work as a leader, and some people are followers. You go to your shul, and you might be a leader there and a follower there. Everybody has their leadership and followership in different places. The question now is how you can influence. And everybody has some sort of thing that they influence. So somehow, some part that and like Tian said, you have to know your place and your thing. Sometimes I tell you, people tell me, you're an example to us. We work and we learn and we look at you and we say, oh, this guy learned so much. And we also, and he's also working. It gives us that cheshik to do the exact same thing. So even without trying to influence, you influence by your actions. Rav Pam over here, Rav Smith brings down that Rav Pam would say that that's one of the reasons why Parshat Vayeishev is usually read on the Shabbat before Hanukkah. The Hashmonaim were a small group of Kahanim, totally inexperienced and untrained in the ways of war, yet they exerted their influence on an entire nation and brought a miracle that we celebrate as Hanukkah. Each person can make a difference in the lives of those around us. All he or she has to do is try. So everybody has that ability. Everybody is a leader in some sense of the word. And we have to exert our influence in those ways. Some more, some less. All right, so let's move on to another lesson in this week's parasha. In this week's parasha, we have that Yosef HaTzadik is sent to Mitzrayim, right? Sold and brought to Mitzrayim. And he's bought by Potiphar. And it says there, Vayar Adonav ki Hashem ito. The chol asher hu oseh, and all that he did. Now, how does Potiphar know that Hashem is with Yosef? First of all, how does Potiphar does he know what Hashem is? Right? He's in Egypt. They have their own deities. They have their own avodah zarah. It's not at that time Judaism wasn't one of the major three religions, right? What does it mean that he saw that Hashem was with Yosef? So Rashi tells us Hashem was with him. It's Shem Shamayim Shagar Bifiv. That the name of heaven was fluent in his mouth, to mean that he regularly would refer to Hashem in conversation. Whenever Yosef would walk around, whenever Yosef would do, he would say, Hashem, you are the one who take care of me. You're the one who does everything for me. Please let me find favor in my master's eyes. Please make sure everything happens well. When Potiphar heard this, he thought Yosef was making magic. He said, you came to Egypt to make magic. And Yosef said, no, I'm praying to my God. And Potiphar saw that whenever time Yosef prayed, everything worked out. And we know the Midrash says, Yosef would pour his master a cup of juice, and all of a sudden Potiphar said, I don't want juice, I want wine. He took the cup, he said, it's wine. Potiphar said, I want uncooked wine. He said, it's uncooked wine. He said, I want cooked. Right away, Yosef said, it's cooked. Yosef HaTzadik was with Hashem, and everything that he did, whatever his master wanted, that's what happened. The Midrash Rabbah states that Yosef praised and blessed Hashem for everything. Yosef's success was because Hashem's name was in his mouth all the time. He kept on davening. Some people believe, we have this assumption that we have davening 3 times a day. And that's it. That's the time I talk to Hashem. Even if a person would think that, right? But 3 times a day, I daven to Hashem. Yosef HaTzadik taught us something else. Yosef HaTzadik taught us we daven to Hashem 24/7. Every time we're doing something, we're davening to Hashem. I remember my father would say that he would watch his father and grandfather when they would go to work in Samarkand and those places, in Bishkek. They would open the store, as they're opening the locks to the store, they would say, Elhad Rabbi Meir Anenu, God of Rabbi Meir Balanes, answer us. Meaning they should help us with the parnasah. They did something else. You always will say, Shem Hashem Na'aseh v'natzliach. In the name of Hashem, we should be successful. Every time you do something, you're praying to Hashem. That's what Yosef HaTzadik was teaching us. He was teaching us that prayer is 24/7. It tells us in Devarim, for which is a great nation that has a God who is close to it, as is Hashem our God, that whenever we call to Him, He answers. Not just during Shaharim and Hanaravi. Every time. That is the image of a Jew, Rav Pincus would say. That he lives in such close proximity to Hashem, he's always talking to Hashem. He says that's why Matan Torah, they compare Matan Torah to a Hatan and Kala, that we're becoming the Kala, the Hatan, to a marriage. Why to a marriage? A relationship in a marriage is that you're 100% in, right? It's a new form. The relationship is always. It's the same thing with the Jewish people and Hashem. We're always in the relationship, not just in shul, not just on Shabbat, but 24/7 we're in a relationship with Hashem. We're always talking to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The story goes about Shem Tov. At a young age, his father was very sick and his father was dying, and his father called him in. He was 5 years old at the time, and he said to the Baal Shem Tov, his name was Yisrael, and they called him Srulikul. He said, I'm about to pass away, but I want you to know that you have a Father in heaven, and whenever you feel the need to talk to Him, Just do so. He will always listen. This is the type of idea that Yosef HaTzadik was teaching us. When a person knows that Hashem is with him, and he understands that that's his success, this would lead him to a whole new way of leading his life. Here in the Peninim al Torah, he brings down a very, very interesting story about prayer, about davening and davening to Hashem. There was a family spending their vacation in Tiberia, and one day the mother and the two young daughters decided to go to a beach where there was separate swimming, and they were going to go swimming. And the father went to the kever of Remeir Baal Hanes to go and pray. The two girls went into the water. There was a very strong waves coming, so they knew it was strong and they didn't want to get caught in it, so they were playing it safe. But all of a sudden a big wave came and one of the girls got swept into the water. It's a true story. And she didn't know how to swim. She was starting to drown, and the other girl started to scream, and the mother saw and she said, please, please, someone save her. There were no lifeguards. So she runs away from the beach to the road where the street is. And she tried to stop the cars, and people were just zooming by her. Finally, one car stopped. A middle-aged man came out, and he said, what happened? She said, my daughter is drowning. She can't swim, please, please. And he said, where? And she pointed, and he started to run. And in the car that he left, his wife was there, and his wife says, please be careful. Remember, you had a heart attack, and you're recuperating from a heart attack. Don't run quickly. And he didn't listen. He just ran and ran. He goes into the water, and he comes out with a girl. And the mother looks and says, no, that's my other daughter. She probably also went in. And so she takes her first daughter, and he says, where did you see your other daughter last? And she points to the place. And he goes, and within a few minutes, he comes back out, and he's holding this other girl in his hand. And the people are screaming at him, you're keeping her head in the water. Take it out, take it out. He was so tired and exhausted that he was having difficulty getting her head out of the water. He finally brought her back to the beach, to the shore. He began CPR. And finally, the girl started to breathe. The rescue team came. She was not responding. They took her to the hospital. They got to the hospital, and the doctors take a look and said she was under for so long. There's a very small chance that she's going to make it. It looks very bad. Only a miracle will save her. And the family said, if a miracle is what it's going to need, that's what we're going to do. And they started to daven and daven. And they were davening, as they know, even if there's a sword on a person's throat, he davens to Hashem, Yeshua Hashem care of ayin, because the salvation of Hashem is as quick as a blink of an eye. And their daughter was in the hospital for a few days, and she responded to the treatment. And within a week later, she was able to walk out of the hospital on her own. It was a miracle. The doctors couldn't believe it. And the family decided they were going to make a Suda Hoda'ah. And they wanted to include the rescuer, the person who rescued her, also in the Suda Hoda'ah. And they couldn't find him right away. Eventually they found him. He lived on a kibbutz, and he was totally chiloni. He wasn't religious at all. But they insisted that he come to the Suda Hoda'ah, and he came. And everybody was thanking him and thanking him. And he said, I did nothing. They said, whatever your nothing is a lot more than everyone else's. And then he said, but I want to tell you guys a story. He says, I grew up in a house, a secular house. We never had any religion in the home. In college, I became a swimmer. I became an Olympic swimmer. And then I became a successful lawyer. Life was very good for me until one evening, after a swim, I had pain in my chest and I kneeled over. I suffered a massive heart attack. It took a lot of time in the hospital, medication, and physical therapy to bring me back to health. And I recently decided to return to swimming, and my wife said not to. She said I was too weak, and it can cause another heart attack. And you should know that I started slowly swimming. And if I wouldn't have started swimming last week, I never would have been able to save your daughter. Because I was totally out of shape. When I jumped into the water, I was so happy that I saved your daughter. But then I was told that there's another girl. I became very anxious. Oh my gosh, did I let the other girl actually drown because I went after the wrong girl? And then when I actually found her, and I realized I kept her head longer in the water than I was supposed to, not paying attention to how I was holding her, I came home that night and I broke down crying, thinking how I killed that girl. Instead of saving her, I killed her. My wife tried to keep telling me to calm down. It's not my fault. And he says, that next day, I went back to the beach. I climbed up on a hill overlooking the beach, and I looked up to the sky. Until that day, I never davened once in my life. I never prayed. I don't even know what prayer means. I knew there was a Hashem. And so I began my talk to Hashem, and I said, Hashem, this is the first time that I'm speaking to you. I no longer can go on living in this manner. Please ignore my past and consider it as if I have been praying to you all my life. And please listen to my prayer and let it be a merit for this young girl that I attempted to save and grant her life. Please, Hashem. He says, I returned home and I immediately called the hospital to see if Hashem listened. Imagine how excited I was when the hospital told me that your daughter had woken up and that she was able to leave the hospital. The lesson is quite simple. He was a simple, ignorant Jew who had been assimilated all his life. He was clueless about Judaism. But when he prayed with sincerity and he said, Hashem, please, can you provide the girl with a miracle? Immediately, his prayers were answered. Prayers can turn any situation. Can turn any situation around. The fact is, we say that Yosef HaTzadik had Hashem's name, Shogar B'Piv, commonly saying Hashem, Hashem, Hashem. And that's why he was Ish Matzliach. But what about us? Don't we have Hashem's name on our lips as well? Every time someone says, how you doing? What do we say? Baruch Hashem. They say, Im Yetza Hashem, L'Shem Shamayim. Right, we're always saying Hashem. So how come we don't feel it? Rav Wolbe would say, people write on a piece of paper, Besati de Shemaya, Besamodale, and then they start writing all sorts of Lashon Harot and all sorts of bad things on the paper. He says, once he was talking to a Gadol, and they were looking at the street, and this Gadol Adam Gadol said, not even one of these people is thinking about Hashem. Meaning that we say Baruch Hashem, we say Be'ezat Hashem, and Mitzah Hashem, but we're just saying it as phrases. But we're not really meaning it. Yosef HaTzadik, when he said Be'ezrat Hashem, when he said Mitzah Hashem, he meant it. He really said with Hashem's help, and he really believed it. That was the midah of Yosef HaTzadik. And that's how we're supposed to pray as well. That when we're praying, we really mean it. Some people, they pray to Hashem, help, but in their mind they're thinking how they themselves are going to do it. They themselves are doing everything. Not leaving it for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In fact, he says over here another interesting idea. The Vilna Gaon says, when a person is constantly thinking about Hashem, he won't come to Averot. If he's always thinking of Hashem, then he won't come to an Avirah. Hashem granted Yosef HaTzadik because he was always thinking of Hashem, Hashem actually put another letter into his name to make him Yehosef. In Tehillim it says Yehosef. Hashem put part of his name into Yosef because Yosef always was thinking of Hashem. The Slomo Rebbe was once asked, how can a person build emunah in Hashem? And the Rebbe answered, a person should build his emunah by always talking about Hashem. Always talking how Hashem is helpful, how Hashem does this, how Hashem does that for him. When a person does that, it'll lead him to believing Hashem. But a person really has to talk about it. For real, believe it. Not just to say it. We'll move on to our last lesson from this week's Parashah. A man was traveling on a business trip to a distant shore when a terrible storm hit his ship and it destroyed the vessel. Everybody was thrown overboard, and the storm raged through the whole night. The next morning, the exhausted and dehydrated man washed up on a small, uninhabited island. And he soon came to realize he was the only person who survived the shipwreck. He began to daven to Hashem to please rescue him. And every day he would go on the beach and look for anyone to rescue him. And nothing came. He davened and davened. And he exhausted. He eventually managed to build himself a little hut. And every day he would go out looking for some food and come back to his little hut, and that's how he lived his life. One day, as he was going out and getting some food, he came back to his hut and he found his hut in flames. Smoke rolling up to the sky, whatever he had left over in that hut, all burnt, all was gone. He was in disbelief. He said, Hashem, how? I'm already shipwrecked and I had a little hut, few possessions, everything got burned. How can you do this to me? And he went to sleep depressed. Early the next day, he was awakened by the sound of a ship approaching. A ship had come to rescue him. The rescue ship sent out a boat to pick him up. And he kept asking, how did you know I was here? For so long I was waiting. And I said, why? We saw your smoke signal. They replied, the Nimshal is, Yosef was placed in a terrible situation. He was removed from his family and his surroundings. And he could have been upset on his lot at life. But Yosef recognized, Vahi Hashem et Yosef. Vahi Ish Matzliach. Hashem was with Yosef, and he was an Ish Matzliach. Why? Because Yosef realized that Hashem put him here. And somehow it's for our good. Somehow. This week I go to my car after in the morning I go to my car, everything normal, I didn't pay attention to the front. In the afternoon I'm walking past and I see my license plate on a slant. So I walk over and I see someone hit my front bumper really hard and smashed it, and half of my license plate got knocked off. And the whole bumper is smashed in. I don't understand why it happened, but I believe that it's for the Tovah. For some reason, somehow it's good. Yosef HaTzadik said something is happening. Hashem is at work in our lives, even during the midst and the suffering. Remember, even if your house is burning, somehow that's for the good. It may be the first step to your salvation. That was Yosef HaTzadik and how he looked. The important part is that even when Yosef HaTzadik was in the dungeons, in prison, the pasuk says, "Ba'asher Hashem ito," Hashem was still with him. To tell us, even when a person is in jail, Hashem is still there with him. He's in the worst places in his life. Hashem is still with him. Rav Wolbe once attended a lecture in Sweden. In the middle of the speech, the speaker said that Sweden was a treif place. It was not kosher. And Rav Wolbe was taken very back of that. He said, how can you say that Sweden is treif? Then means if you're saying it's not kosher, it means there's no Hashem here. How could you say there's no Hashem in all of Sweden? It says Hashem fills up the whole world. Hashem's glory is everywhere. He's found everywhere. Hashem is found in everything that goes on. Yosef HaTzadik was thrown into jail. All of a sudden, 2 officers of Paro were also sent to jail. Rav Wolbe says, you know why that happened? Because there was so much talk about Yosef, Hashem wanted to make the talking to stop. So he made another scandal. So now that people talk about another scandal, this is where they start talking about Yosef. Rav Yochanan Levitt said a person would look with the eyes of Torah, he would see Hashgacha Pratit, even in the newspaper. You see, Hashem is controlling the world for him, even in the headlines in the newspaper. Every time the media starts attacking religious Jews, all of a sudden, another big news comes out. Some sort of scandal, some sort of attack, something like that. Hashem knows how, what, when. He knows how to shift the spotlight and everything He wants to do. What's important for us to remember, our surroundings do not always support our avodat Hashem, the best way to serve Hashem. But we choose whether Hashem is with us or not in everything that we do. He says over here, Hashem can be found in the ashrams of India, in the subways of Manhattan, and even in the North Pole. We simply have to look for Him. And if we do, we will find Him everywhere, even in the daily headlines. Bezat Hashem, with these lessons, the lessons that we do have power to influence, and do not think that our influence is not enough. Give it a try, give it a go, do it b'chokhmah, and you'll be able to influence people. Furthermore, we learn what it means to daven 24/7 to Hashem and to really believe Hashem is there for us, listening and helping us. And to also understand that Hashem is always with us in everything that we're doing, and everything that's happening to us. And a person should always feel that Hashem is right there on his side. And with this, I would love to wish everybody a Shabbat Shalom.